get started with our work session here with policy and analytics. Where we want to start at, Chris?
Yeah, I'll just highlight something here real fast. I think we met in June when policy or Steeple came and shared us some of the high-level 30,000-foot view impacts, potential impacts related to Senate Enrolled Act 1. And so that's when we partnered up with Policy Analytics to take a little bit of a deeper dive, getting into the parcel levels to hopefully get a better picture of, or a truer picture of what those impacts may look like. And so April is joining us from Policy Analytics to share a little bit about the information that they found out from that study. So,
well, thank you. Again, I'm April Fitterling. I'm with Policy Analytics. We are based out of Minneapolis, and we do parcel level data analysis for districts based projecting their revenue and net assessed values based on that parcel level. So as your certified net assessed value is released, we also pull that parcel level data, and then we pull that into this report, and then we'll have an updated report once we receive all of that information. So this is preliminary based on 2 to 4% growth on the net assessed value, looking at projections kind of early on, so everyone can get a feel of what the new deductions are going to be doing to assessed value. So I'll just have you kind of go through the slides. So the first slide that we're going to talk through what it looks like to your tax rate, to your tax levy, and then we'll touch really quickly on what that impact is to the taxpayer. So you can go to the next slide. The first slide here, we're just going to show you the basics of net assessed value, the calculation to get the rate in the levy. So as we've seen the past few years, the net assessed value has been growing. So to receive the exact same levies or generate more levies, you could keep the rate the same or you could drop the rate. Well, now as net assessed values may be driving down due to deductions, to get the exact same levy, the rate's going to have to increase. So just kind of think of this calculation as we go through the next few slides to talk about what that impact to the tax rate is. So next. So we'll tell you about the handful of changes that just happened in Senate Enrolled Act 1. They are now decreasing or phasing out the standard deduction and increasing the supplemental deduction. So they're phasing out the standard deduction that was based on $48,000. As your home assessed value would grow, that became lesser of a percentage. So they're phasing that deduction out over the next 6 years, and they're increasing the supplemental deductions. So by the end in 2031, your home will be taxed on 1/3 of its value. So that's the first change. Next change is they're creating a local property tax credit. So homeowners are getting a 10% max $300 credit on their liability. So just for simple math, if my net AV on my home was $200,000, my liability would be 1%, so $2,000, but they're creating that 10% credit. So now I only have to pay $1,800, so I will see a credit of $200 on my tax liability. So that essentially is creating an additional circuit breaker. So it's dollars that the district would have received, but now they're creating this credit, so now it's something you do not receive. So we'll talk about what that looks like to the district towards the end of the slides here. So then the additional changes to the 2% category, so the agriculture, non-homesteads, and the long-term care, so they're increasing the deductions in that category, and then they're also changing the ag base rate calculation from 8% to 9%. And then finally, for the business personal property tax changes on the next slide, it is actually kind of twofold here. So, and please stop me if I'm going too quickly. I just want to go through the changes quickly and then talk more about what's the impact may be. So as the business personal property tax, prior to Senate Enrolled Act 1, anything under the de minimis amount of $80,000 was tax exempt. So now they've increased that limit to $2 million. So if you're a business and you have a piece of equipment that is under $2 million in value, you now are tax exempt on that piece of equipment. So that's the first piece. And we have modeled that in our projections that all of that equipment that was reported under $2 million now will be tax exempt, and that will start in 2027. What we don't have in our model is the change that they are creating to that value floor. So if you're a business owner, you have a piece of equipment and you follow the depreciation cycle down to 30%, and you would have stayed at that. And paid taxes on 30% of that piece of equipment. Well, now you can follow the depreciation cycle down to 0 on any new equipment purchased after 2025. So we don't know what businesses are going to do to get creative to save some dollars and being taxed on their equipment. So if they're going to create maybe an LLC and buy their equipment, it's considered new equipment to this LLC if they're going to create it, or if they're going to sell their equipment and purchase new, then it can follow that scale and go down to a 0 value and be tax exempt after the depreciation cycle. So businesses are going to get creative. We know that. It's not modeled in our example or in our projections just because we don't know what will happen. But we do know it's going to have an impact over the next X amount of years, as long as this is still in legislation, that they will be able to take that value down to 0 to be tax exempt on the equipment. And then finally, taking the petition remonstrance amount, that automatic to referendum amount from 80 cents to 70 cents. So prior to this, we knew that anything between 40 cents and 80 cents was subject to referendum. Anything over 80 cents was directly sent to referendum, but now they've brought it down to 70, so kind of closing that gap. So that's just wanted to talk about just kind of debt tax rate there, and we'll talk about where you're at coming up. So what does that look like for you guys? The tax burden shift. So we're just looking at 25, 26, and 2031. So really what happens in 26 is just that homestead credit of 10% or $300 max to the homeowners. So not much of a shift in that tax burden in 26. But by the time we get to 2031, you'll see that the agriculture decreases a little bit, the personal decreases a little bit, and the residential does increase. So kind of think of it as, we're showing it as the exact same size of pie in all 3 charts here, but actually by the time it gets to 2031, it's actually a smaller pie, and as they make those deductions, it kind of changes the slice of the pie and takes on that tax burden shift. So looking at your net assessed value projection. So if we look at this slide, the green is the gross assessed value, and then the blue is the net assessed value, what it was, and then what it would have been prior to Senate World Act 1, and the orange is what we're projecting post Senate World Act 1. So think of it as math calculation. You have your gross assessed value minus all of those deductions, and that's what creates your net assessed value. So as you see, we have a little asterisk in for 26 because we are seeing net assessed values, or hearing net assessed values are going to be coming in higher for 26. They are, there's multiple things going on. They are resetting the commercial and industrial charts for taxation. So the DLGF is resetting that, so that may have an impact on your district. But we are seeing slight increases, more than the 2 to 4% that we have projected in our slides here. So that's where we kind of make that little asterisk. But if that happens in 2026, kind of just makes this, is what we're assuming is going to happen. It's just going to make it have a little bump up, and then you're going to see that net assessed value continue down, because that's, no matter what, all of these deductions are going to be phased in until 2031. And then as you see 2031, it starts to climb back up. That's because we have a new base floor and all of the deductions are set in place. And you'll see that the gross assessed value, should have talked about this first, it continues to grow besides that 1 year in 2027 when that business personal property tax piece comes out. But it's based on a market value system. So as our home values are assessed and they grow, so does that gross assessed value. So that's kind of what we are looking at and projecting for your net assessed value going forward with these deductions. So with that net assessed value being projected to drive down, what does that look like for your rates and your levies? And we'll go to the next slide for that. Yeah, we'll skip over that one. That just tells you, it's kind of everything that I'm going to say here. So we are running 2 scenarios for every district just to say what could happen to your levy and your rate based on these assessed values going down. So in the first scenario, we are keeping the 25 levy steady. And you'll see prior to Senate World Act 1, what would have happened to the tax rate if the net assessed value was continuing to grow like we showed on that blue line prior. But the post Senate World Act 1, what would happen to the rate if you were to try to generate those exact same levies to the rate would have to increase to generate those levies exactly like we had in 2025. For the 2025 rate scenario, we've taken the 0.6108 and continued that out to 2035. And prior to Senate Rolled Act 1, you would have seen your levies grow. Well, to get those exact same levies post Senate Rolled Act 1, you'll see what the what the rate has to climb to get up to that levy that you would have seen prior. So if you go to the next slide, those are kind of the numbers on the screen. That's what my eyes like to see, but I know others are visual with line graphs. So as you can see, if we did the rate-based scenario, it's the teal line, and what would happen to your debt service rate if the net assessed values were to decline like we're projecting. So you can see the rate, the dashes are pre-Senate Rolled Act 1 and the solid lines are post. So if you follow the rate scenario, by 2031, the debt service rate alone could be up over 93 cents, and then the levy scenario could be up over 79 cents. So calculation, net assessed values driving down, tax rates need to drive up to generate the exact same levy or prior to what you would have received prior to Senate Rolled Act 1. So this is just a visual. Like I said, in 2026, if we do see an assessed value bump up, we may see just a smaller curve to this, but we will see a curve to this to generate the same levies as 25, or potentially the levies that you would have received prior to Senate Rolled Act 1, based on what to manage here. So that's just a picture of the debt service rate. The next slide is what could potentially happen to the total tax rate. So at $1.10 right now, it looks like 26 may be able to sustain at $1.10 and generate the exact same levies based on the rate and the levy scenario. But overall, you'll see that tax rate projected to climb as those net assessed values drive down. And again, this is a moving chart, just depending on what those assessed values end up actually coming in. So that's one impact. So the next we'll talk about actual revenue. So they have decided to do away with LIT, and there's two pieces to LIT. One is certified shares, which is direct revenue to the district, and then the second is called a post-tax replacement credit. So that is applied to homeowners on their tax liability. So it just comes right off their bill. It's something they do not have to pay. Well, they are getting rid of this. So if you scroll down one more, you'll see that your district receives certified shares, so direct revenue from the county. And then also your homeowners receive that property tax relief credit, just over $3.7 million. So the first one is cash not received to the district. The second is credits to the homeowners going away. So if you scroll to the next one, we'll take a look at what that does to your levy. So we talked about net assessed value and rates and levies. Now let's talk about your operations levy. You'll see this line graph. So you'll see in 26 is where that homestead credit begins. So it essentially creates an additional circuit breaker. The business personal property tax comes out of the net assessed value and in 27. And then the LIT certified shares and the PTRC impact begins in 2028. So that means direct certified shares, direct certified revenue, a check being written to the district will no longer happen because LIT is going away. And then also because the PTRC is being put into place, it may be pushing your homeowners over the 1% tax liability. So then it would create an additional circuit breaker for the district. So we'll take a look at the next slide at this 10% or $300 max credit, which starts in 2026. What it essentially does is we're calling it a post-Senate Rolled Act 1 circuit breaker. So this is revenue that is just not going to be received, and you'll see in actually the entire chart, you'll see the blue line is operations and the orange is debt service. So we've modeled that because that's how it is set in legislation right now. We feel that they are going to come back and protect the debt service fund because it is not currently, for the traditional circuit breakers, it is. It does not impact the debt service fund, it impacts operations. Well, somebody forgot to do that in this legislation. So they will most likely come back and protect it in 26, but for 26, you will have a circuit breaker loss to operations and debt service. If they protect it in 27, it doesn't just go away. it will now then hit your operations fund. So this circuit breaker, it's just revenue not received to the district. That would have been planned revenue prior to these credits. You could see just under 342,000 circuit breaker that would hit to the operations fund in 2027. And you'll see that it would continue to grow as the years go on. So that's the one hit to the operations fund. So if you go to the next slide, this is just a model of if they protect that debt service fund. The dark red line is the actual red line is similar to what we saw 2 slides ago. And then we put the dark red line in to show you what the impact to the operations levy would be if they protect the debt service fund. So you'll see those circuit breakers are created, driving down that revenue in 26, 27, and 28. And then it does start to climb, but like they're saying, it's less of more, but I think that's just less. So we'll take a look next about, I guess I'll pause right there. Any questions on those circuit breakers or impact to the levies, debt service or operations? I know we're going really fast, and it's a lot of information, and it's a lot to digest. Okay, so what does this look like to your taxpayer? So we pulled one here from Noble Township, and the median AV is 173,000. So if the homeowner gets their tax bill in 2026, they will see a decrease. Is it that full 10%? Maybe not necessarily, because their AV is probably going to continue to grow on their home, and then they'll see that credit, and you'll see it dip down a little bit. You'll see the 2 lines, the red and the teal, we're following that levy-based scenario or the rate-based scenario, whether which one you followed, what the impact would be on the homeowner. So you'll see that they follow pretty closely to each other, no matter what scenario you do, but you'll see the liability of the homeowner decrease in 26 due to that credit. You'll see it increase in 27, and then you'll see a bigger jump in 2028 due to that PTRC going away. So then it will continue to climb because the market-based system values on their home will continue to climb. So we just wanted to give a picture of, is this massive tax relief for homeowners? Maybe, maybe not. Just depends on what the view is. So that's just one impact. And then the next couple of slides are just a summary of what we've gone over. And if you want to read that to fall asleep tonight, go right ahead. We'll just skip right over those. And then the 2 final slides here in the appendix are really just a summary of what we've talked about. Talking about the certified levies, the circuit breaker loss, and I've highlighted that in red because that is direct revenue that you will not be receiving. And then you'll see the net levies that are projected to be received, and then the percentage of circuit breaker loss, and then what could potentially happen to the tax rates due to those net assessed values driving down. And then I like the bar chart because you will see, you do see kind of similar revenues going across the board there, but we all know that utilities are not going to stay still. We know that our staff want to be paid and get raises. We know that everything goes up. There's inflation on everything. But really, the impact to your revenue kind of stays flatline. And it's really due to those circuit breakers being created, no matter what scenario you run, a levy or a rate base. But just to sum it up, you may see a little bit of increase in 26 due to the net assessed value coming in higher. But all in all, we will see a drive down in that net assessed value as the deductions are taking place. So any questions? Well, it is a lot, and I think I heard somebody say, I need to hear something 6 times before it really sinks in. And trust me, I had to do the same thing. So I think I forgot to mention that I was the CFO of Warsaw for 8 years, and I was actually with Warsaw in their business department for a total of 11 before I came to Policy Analytics. So sitting in your shoes and Travis and Chris's shoes, this is a lot of information to digest, and it's going to take a little bit to come up with a game plan of how to manage this and tackle it and do what's best for students. So we know that we're here at Policy Analytics. I'm actually staying in Warsaw, so if you guys need anything, I'm right down the road.
Well, obviously, obviously, excuse me, part of the answer that I think as a board we're after is how do we plan for the future as far as what we're trying to do with our school improvement and our buildings and all that.
Mhm.
Because as we launch into what we anticipate hopefully to do in the southern part of the district, this is not necessarily good news.
Yeah, I would say that I'm gonna tag you in here too, because he's on the debt side. It's not good news because it is making an impact, but we do have potential capacity for those projects.
Well, they legislate 70 cents,
Mhm.
or you go to referendum, and then they do all this.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why don't we just change everything? I know I'm being cynical, of course, but
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
because we were cruising along, I shouldn't say cruising, that's a bad word.
There was a
We
plan
could
in place.
anticipate, we could plan.
Heading in the right direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we felt where we're at with $1.10, you know, is now we're gonna be playing with rates.
And what does that look like, messaging levies
Yes,
versus rates, and getting everyone to understand that rates really doesn't, that doesn't
everyone
matter.
won't understand.
Yes.
I mean,
The $1.74, if I looked at one page, I thought would jump up to the other, maybe it's higher than that, but yeah, not good. Where was it, yeah?
Well, we can look at a couple of things here. I guess the first impact, obviously, when I look at this slide hits home most for me, from an operational standpoint. We know that we're gonna see losses in revenue in our operations fund just out anyway. Regardless of debt service, regardless of borrowing, we understand that there will be a pretty significant impact to the revenue that we would receive from property tax dollars due to these impacts. And so, you know, right there, just off of this diagram, you know, you're looking, right now, we're around the $5.1 million, but when you get down to 2028, I mean, we're going down, that's $600,000 right there that we would not generate in our operation fund budget. And so that is obviously an impact with that. Then you play the card with the debt service and how we plan for the future related to that. And we probably have some options. I don't know, Luke, if you want to share a little bit about what some of those possibilities may look like.
Yeah. Well, I guess to back up a little bit to your point, I mean, there was a plan in place with the $1.10. We felt like we had the gross assessed value growing at a conservative pace to do that and fund all the projects, had a long-term plan built in to not just fund that, but also fund the operations fund. Obviously, this changed everything. And one of the biggest impacts is just going from that 80 to 70 cents. We've talked about with a lot of schools, and we talked about with your board back in, I don't know, was that June, May or June, about do we switch to a levy strategy going forward? And I think a lot of schools are going to have to do that eventually, because to your point earlier, it's going up at some point as these deductions get phased in. When do you want to start going to the levy-based strategy? I mean, I think that's going to be part of the question. So we saw Wabash County's assessed value came out, and it was over 11% for 26. So that wasn't baked in because that just came out like a week ago. But you would have some options for 2026 if you wanted to maintain the rate for $1.10. That would give you some additional capacity if you wanted to go that route. Eventually, you're going to have to go to a levy strategy. And the hard part about that is even if we maintain that strategy, you're going to go over the 70 cents at some point. So while we're maintaining the levy, we also have to keep that 70-cent threshold in mind. And not just when we're talking about funding the projects on the south end of the district, but also there's a $500,000 loss in the operations fund. Is there anything that we can do on the debt service to offset that, or where are those expenses and cost savings or cost reductions coming from? We talked about last time, they all play a part into what you're strategy is long-term. And that's, I think, what we're trying to figure out, but you do have an option this year that if you wanted to maintain the $1.10 tax rate for one more year, you certainly could. And that's something, not that you can make the decision today, but you have that option.
So, and to do that, just so you're clear, make sure I don't say this incorrectly, but to do that, we would have to, we talked about, we know we have to make a borrowing for the south projects regardless. And we talked a little bit about the timing of that. And so to do that strategy, we would need to borrow some of that by the end of this year for those projects in 2026.
Which would mean starting the process pretty early, because you're gonna have to go through those 2 hearings, wait your 30 days, have some additional board meetings, sell bonds, and then close by December 31st. Hard to believe we're already in August, but so the time is pretty quick. So the one thought was, are there some, even just architect fees or anything that you could pay out of a small bond issue this year, manage $1.10 rate, get you somewhere until potentially next fall when we have more data. We know, did they do anything in the short session to make any additional changes that we need to be aware of and adjust the long-term plan? And then also potentially know the 27 net assessed value at that point. Is there a surprise again on the positive side, or it just gives us more ability to react? So I think from when we came out in May or June versus now, I think there is some optimism because there was the increase in the net assessed value. So it does help. I mean, if you think back to that curve that April was talking about, it really bumps it up that year and gives you some additional capacity and gives you some breathing room against that 70 cents. Because right now, I think you guys know this, your debt service rate is at 61 cents.
And so the benefit of that is with the last project, we were paying a lot of those costs ourselves up front until we borrowed. We waited later to get a better borrowing rate, et cetera. And we just covered those costs. But we are starting to accrue costs for these projects on the south side already. And so we could borrow some money now, a small portion of that, to start making those payments related to that.
Isn't there some legality though about, because years back I was wanting to store, save, and then in anticipation of what we hoped to do a couple years ago and it didn't happen.
So there are rules related to how much you can maintain in your debt service balance or fund. And you might be able to explain a little better than I can.
Yeah, it's essentially 15% of your next year's payments. It's how much you can have in your cash. Are you referring to that or sitting on bond proceeds?
No, that.
Okay.
And so what will happen is, if I'm wrong, again, tell me, I'm learning this as well. So what will happen then is if, because of our balance and because of the debt that we have, because we'll have some debt starting to be paid off, that we will be over that 15%. And then the DLGF will reduce our debt service allowance for this 2026 budget because of that. And so that could impact our borrowing capacity in the future.
So your statutory allowance of how much you can keep in cash based on your current debt schedule, which you guys only have 2 bond issues outstanding, is dropping from 25 to 26. So if you want to replace that drop in cash, you would do it with increasing the levy by a borrowing, essentially. So if you wanted to maintain the $1.10 tax rate, you would essentially need about an $800,000 payment in 26 to do that. Now, that's not necessarily an $800,000 borrowing. That can be more, but maybe stretched over a couple of years.
So essentially, like, for the south projects, if we're borrowing $40 or $45 million, planning to do that in 2026, we may borrow a couple million now so that we can cover those early costs anyway. and also maintain that tax rate.
And I would say that's a real common strategy that we see throughout the state where you borrow, I mean, typically you don't need all 45 million or 40 million up front. It's kind of a slow process to get going, and you're not receiving bids until well after you even start the legal process, which are probably accruing costs on architect fees, maybe site equipment, permits, things like that. So a lot of times schools will do a small borrowing in that first year to kind of get them through potentially the fall of next year to take out some of those variables. Again, what do they do in the short session? What happens with 27 net assessed value? Gives you more time to react at that point, but also so you're not using your cash to fund that. The other benefit is if you're not using your cash, that also means that in your operations fund, it's earning 4% or whatever you're earning there too. So it's giving you some additional dollars that you can actually use on a day-to-day basis.
And I also say that would also give us, we would know what our bids would be from the
Yes.
project coming in 2026 as well, so we'd have a better idea of how much of that amount we would actually need to borrow.
But it doesn't answer the long-term dilemma, the longer-term dilemma of 5, 6, 8 years.
Well, so could you take a borrowing like in 2026, you know, we know we want to do the south project, but anything when we're moving forward outside of this south project and the Northville project, you know, anything that's gonna take our tax rate up above that 70 cents, you know, is there any projects, could you, like if you needed to replace a boiler or something like that, could you spend money on that now?
And reimburse yourself, is that what you're saying? You certainly could do that. You could also include that into a potential bond issue as well. And one way to look at it too, and we've seen this a lot, especially recently, is let's say the Southwood project is $40 million. Some schools may authorize $60 million. Only issue $40 million for the Southwood, but then in case you get over that 70-cent threshold, you have that remaining authorization or line of credit. And then if you do need to replace a boiler, it's not, hey, we need to go to referendum, and oh, by the way, that's every other year now in general elections only. You have that authorization, you can make that decision at that time.
I guess that's my fear is, well, you know, we've been talking about that before, you know, if you have a big breakdown or something that you know is coming up and you have to wait 2 years to get that referendum, and how the referendums usually go if they fail.
Yeah.
So then what do you do?
So I think a lot of school boards and administrations that are thinking exactly along that line. If they're in your shoes, around 60 cents. We know likely that you're going to go above 70 cents. We don't know when that's going to be exactly because of that 6-year phase-in. But how do you protect yourself? And is that authorizing more and just keeping that authorization back in case something happens? And also we know there's additional needs too. So I mean, are there some, you know, if you look 5, 10 years out in your plan, is a boiler likely to be replaced in 5 years? A roof likely going to need to be replaced, or paving, windows, doors, all those things that we know that a school has to replace, that doesn't maybe get the community excited, but it also keeps everyone, you know, warm, cool, or dry. So those are needs, and I think that would be one strategy would be to include that in the authorization. Again, just because you authorize it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to issue that amount. And if you authorize 60, for example, issue 40, 5 years later, boiler breaks for 5 million, you come back and issue 5 million. So it's not like you have to issue all 60 by a certain point as it is now.
And Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, the tax rate would only be affected by what is borrowed, not authorized.
Correct, yes.
The 60 authorization doesn't affect what the tax rate would be. Borrow, but until that time. So in Luke's example, it would be that, so kind of back to one of those graphs when we hit 2031 is kind of the worst of the years, and then it kind of starts coming back down. We can manage the the idea would be we would manage that to even perhaps get back to a situation where we're budgeting back to the rate rather than the levy over those 5, 6.
And that's
7
kind of
years.
what we're seeing a lot of districts are having discussions about right now, because if you're kind of looking at this chart right here, so let's just say, so we know that 26 is coming in a little, NAV is coming in a little higher. So you capture that higher levy, so, you know, in this scenario, it goes from 6.2 to 6.5. But that's at that same rate, 6108. But then in 27, if they see AVs come down a little bit to capture that 6.5 again and then beyond. So switching from the rate scenario this year to the levy scenario going forward and maintaining maybe that 6.5 rate instead of 6.2, capturing that this year because you're going to have growth, then switching to that levy scenario, management scenario. That's what we're having a lot of districts talk about right now, because if we're seeing that growth, can we capture it right now? Do we have the ability to capture it right now? Do we have the capacity to capture it right now? And then sustain that going forward. So that's just kind of something to think about, like you were meaning, like do we rate manage this year and then levy manage next year at that higher levy because we're able to capture it. And then maybe that, because you see the levy scenario has a slower increase in the rate going in those projections than the prior to levy scenario below.
And I think we will also have a better handle on it too, once.
Yes,
the-
so
the
in,
new-
and actually, so you guys have been the first one that was released, so we're just waiting. We received the parcel level data, it's at our tech team, and you guys will actually be the first ones. You're kind of the first ones that we will see and share out to be like, look, this is the data we're seeing. This is where we're seeing the growth. Is it due to those DLGF chart resets, or is it residential or commercial? What's it looking like? And then we'll have this to you probably in the next couple of weeks once the tech team has built it, and that will also kind of be good timing for your planning for what you want to do issuance wise.
So out of all that, the good news is our NAV went 12%, almost 12%.
Yeah.
The rest is not so much good news.
Well, it's just as simple as you'd like to know how much money you could expend on building improvements in the south without squeezing yourself into a box where you can't do.
The other side of this is if everything stays the same.
I was just gonna say, but this is what we know now.
And we don't know what legislation is gonna happen this spring or next
I
spring
mean,
or
I
whatever.
can't imagine, I mean, we're financially decent, and I can't imagine that some school districts that are kind of on the fringe of struggling, I mean, how are they gonna be able to get through this?
The R
Great
word
question.
is,
I
the
mean-
R word is coming out a lot.
I mean, it's just one of those things that I do not know how, you know, unless something changes in legislation, you know, I don't know what percentage that is, but there's gotta be, you know, districts that are just scratching their head.
Operations.
I mean, operations, there's just no way that you're gonna be able to make it work, especially if you're already maxed out.
We're gonna see a lot of operating referendums November 26th. A lot of operating referendums, and communities that probably were no referendum schools or communities 6 months ago. If it's not 26, they're trying to make it to 28, and we're gonna see a lot of 28. I mean, I think typically we've probably seen, what, 4 or 5 per election cycle. Now, some of that's being consolidated into one, but it wouldn't shock me if we're over 25 schools in November 26. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. We're actually working with clients and saying, if you're even thinking about a referendum, start now, because the capacity to handle all the referendums is just not there. Like to do 25, I mean, going from 5 to 6 to 25 is just going to be crazy. And getting all of that communication and having a consultant to help you through, they only so many in the state. And then if you have, there's those that have referendums expiring in 27. Do you go early or do you stretch yourself in 28? So that is another factor. So there's just there's so many kind of perfect storms, and it's going to be a busy November.
But surely intelligent people were behind developing, so they knew the end cause would be increased referendums, right? So is that part of what they hope to accomplish?
If they want it to be a public recognize that, hey, you guys are raising the rates instead of it just being raised. And they have to vote for it, but I mean, again, to help the school districts go, it has to go, or they all fail.
Can we add a layer to that? They can say at the state level that they reduce taxes.
Correct.
Right, but essentially, it's not gonna change.
No, but it'll be somebody else's fault.
The school board.
Yeah.
Well, I think too,
Hopefully.
Yeah, that's who we're targeting.
to April main point on the one slide where it shows the rate for the homeowner, property owner, actually increasing in
Yeah.
27, 28. So, that's gonna get some attention, I think. So,
Especially when there's another governor election in there.
that's an election year, so.
So,
Elections are next year, right?
Yeah, but that's a budget.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
I
what you're saying.
don't know. But I mean, it's good, but it's like,
Yeah, and I'm saying at the statewide,
Yeah, they'll see this, it's only a 1-year
decrease.
Yeah. to the taxpayer. So that would lead you to believe that they would make other changes.
Which was my point, was this is, what we're talking about today isn't gonna last until 2031, I don't believe. The rules that we have to deal with.
But yeah, we're operating in
Yes, but we have to,
present day
we have no
information,
choice,
so.
but to make decisions based on what we know today. Which I think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think when there were probably some schools, when was the 80-cent thing? When did that come around? That they took the opportunity and made the decision at that time, before that happened, to borrow as much as they could before that. And now
they're all going 70.
that turns out to be a bad decision, but at the time, it probably.
So a lot of
was the best
schools,
they could have done.
a lot of schools, when the 80 cents came in, they did the same thing, they authorized, and some schools didn't even use that authorization to this day, but a lot of them authorized, again, just to protect themselves with that 80 cents. Now, they saw the AV growth the next couple of years, and a lot of them were able to get under the 80 cents at that point. You're working against not just going from 80 to 70, but also negating that net assessed value growth over time.
I hate to say this out loud, but it looks to me like somebody in the state house really wants consolidation. Because you can't take the school
I just gonna say
corporations that are
so.
really, really struggling and do something like this to the school corporations that are somewhat efficient operational without thinking that, okay, we just take these little guys and merge them in with somebody who is operational.
But the problem is, it sounds like, I mean, I don't know, you're saying ones that have never been in the referendum category. It looks like everyone's gonna be pushed into that.
One of two things is gonna happen, I mean, it's referendums that fail those, consolidations probably next, and I don't think it's any secret that it's on the table as one of the amendments to Senate Rolled Act 1, that was any county that has less than, was it 50,000 population would be one school corporation, so, I mean, that's gonna take vast majority of Indiana. So it's certainly on the table, or at least in the minds of some legislators, and whether it's referendums or consolidation eventually, I mean, it's.
Well, that's why I make that statement. It looks like somebody's kind of forcing this to happen. It's not it doesn't really go by your population. They're forcing it just by dollars coming in.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not a smart guy, but I can figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we appreciate the information. Obviously, this is for your thoughts. You know, we still have some meetings to see where we're at with the Southwood projects, but we will have to make a decision probably pretty soon as far as how we want to move forward, going into 2026 at least. So.
So I was hopeful we could use policy analytics
Yes.
information to come up with
Yeah,
a target number, a spendable number,
so I'd like
I guess.
to get their information in here, hopefully in a few weeks.
Yeah, so when we get that information, we'll share it with, these guys here, and then Luke will kind of take it from there and work on his side and say, okay, here's what your capacity is, and then, we'll bring it back to Dr. Coon.
Mhm.
And as far as timeline, or if we decide to do a borrowing this year, I think we had one in December, one in November, two in October,
You have one in October.
one out.
We can have a second one,
We can have,
because it doesn't fall over fall break, so it wouldn't, if we need to have a second one in October, we could.
But the
So that-
schedule right now is,
That's where the timing does get pretty tight. So I mean, you're talking 2 board meetings, so 2 September board meetings, maybe October, maybe November for the final one. And then sell and close bonds, and we have to close by December 31st. So if you wanted to do something this year, it would have to be pretty quick.
and we could hold that money, so I'm clear on this, we could hold that money somewhat without actually advancing it for expenditures that might not all have been incurred yet, like prepaying architects kind of bugs me a little bit.
But it's so expensive, we have to make.
Yeah,
Basically.
the hearing just authorizes what we're allowed to approve.
Just authorizing the maximum.
Yeah.
That's all that you're doing. And then, once you got through that, then we would specify how much of that max authorization that you want to borrow this year. And that's where we would look to Travis and Dr. Kuhn to say, how much do you actually need for the architect fees, for all those types of things that come up, to get you to the point where then we have bids in hand, we have all those variables out of the way next fall. And so likely, again, it's usually, a couple $1 million or something like that.
Just for comparison, I mean, when we started the Northfield projects, I mean, we absorbed or made those payments early I shouldn't say early, but before we got the bond, it was about $1.7 million that we ended up having to reimburse ourselves back for. So,
and there would be actual expenses.
yeah.
There would be not important alone for the work later, what they've already done for us. And that amount may be predicated too by, if we decide that we want the rate to be $1.10 for 26.
Mhm.
Again, that
There'd be a minimum number there, yeah.
would be, that may determine the amount as much or more than, how much we're paying the architects and stuff like that now for the work they've done.
Any final questions?
Enough for us to sleep on, or not sleep on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we appreciate your guys' time and
Yeah,
effort.
thank you.
Help.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Guess we'll end this and then get ready for the board meeting.
Yep. 7 minutes. Anybody need a break?